In this video, we are going to look at the CSEC January 2021 paper 3. So here we have our first question where we have the diagram below shows a container of length 3a. So that's the length of the container here, 3a, which I consider this to be the height of the container, right? 3a. That John made to store cooking oil. And the cross section of the container is an equilateral triangle. All right, so this triangle here is an equilateral triangle. So this will be the cross section. All right, so different between prisms and pyramid is that a prism, you have a constant cross section, whereas the pyramid, the base of the pyramid would keep the size would keep changing. All right, will keep as they go up, you keep getting smaller and smaller, or as they go down, keep getting larger and larger. All right, so this is a prism. Of course, the volume of a prism is the cross-sectional area times the height. So the area of this equilateral triangle times this 3a, which will be the height. Okay, so let's continue to read here now. So the cross-section of the container is an equilateral triangle of side A and perpendicular height h. So here we have an enlarged diagram of the triangular cross-section of the container, right? So that's this here. All right, so we're showing that the height is h, and we're showing that equilateral triangle of side A. So if this side here is A, then here is also A, and here is also A. So let's put that in. So we're going to have that here is A as well as here is A. So now what we want to find here, the first part of the question, we want to find the perpendicular height h in terms of A. So no numbers are given. All right, so we're just going to write the formula to find the height h. So if we look, we can see a right angle triangle here. So we can use Pythagoras theorem where the length of the side is A, and the length of this side will be what, half of A, because this height would split this base in half. So here I drew the right angle triangle, which is half of this equilateral triangle. So we'll have here will be A, here will be the height h. As I said, this piece here will be half of the base. This height will split this base in half. So a half of A, which is A over 2, or a half times A. Anyhow you want to put it. All right, so I'll put A over 2 like this. So first, we'll identify the hypotenuse of this right angle triangle. So the side opposite the right angle will be the hypotenuse. So we'll have that this side here, to draw a line from the right angle, it will touch the hypotenuse. So this side here, A, will be hypotenuse. And now Pythagoras theorem states that the square on the hypotenuse, so that's A squared, is equal to the sum of the squares on the other two sides. And the other two sides are h and A over 2. So we're going to have h squared plus A over 2 squared. Now, we want to write the height h in terms of A. So basically, this is a formula, and what you want to do here now is transpose for h. All right, so what I can do, I could square the A and the 2 and get A squared over 4. So I'll have A squared plus h squared plus square the A, which will be A squared, and square this 2 down here, which will be 4. All right, and now I could transfer this positive, shade it. Right, so I'm transferring this positive A squared over 4 across to the other side of the equal sign. So the sign in front of it will turn from positive to negative. So what I'm going to have is A squared take away A squared over 4 is equal to h squared. So shade this. All right, so we see that the positive A squared over 4 transfer across the equal sign and turn to negative A squared over 4. Now the question asks us to write the perpendicular height h in terms of A. Right now we have h squared in terms of A. Now what I need to do now is take the square root of this side, this left-hand side, to get rid of the square here on the right-hand side. Now before I take the square root on this side, what I can do is I could simplify this a little bit. All right, so I can use the LCM, put this A squared over 1, take away A squared over 4, find the LCM. All right, so we're going to have between 1 and 4, the LCM obviously going to be 4. All right, of course, this is equal to h squared. So I'll have 1 into 4 is 4, and 4 times A squared will give you 4A squared. All right, so that's 4A squared. Take away, we're going to have 4 into 4, 1, and 1 times this A squared will just give you A squared. So I'll have A squared. So now we have like terms here, 4A squared, take away 1A squared, because A squared is 1A squared. All right, so 4 take away 1 is 3. So what we're going to have is 3A squared over 4 is equal to h squared. And now I can just take the square root on the left-hand side. So square root of 3 h squared over 4, and that will be equal to h. All right, so now I have h in terms of a. All right, so that's the first part of the question, part A. Now here we have part B, where we're going to show that the area of the triangular cross-section in terms of A is equal to the square root of 3 over 4 e squared. Now here they have note that the square root of 3 divided by 4 is approximately 0.433. Now what we're going to do here is work out the area of this triangle. So we just found that the height h is equal to this so we just found that this height h is equal to the square root of 3a squared divided by 4. We know the area of the triangle is what? Base by height over 2. All right, so what I did is I brought the triangle across on this page, and I just wanted to recall that the height is equal to the square root of 3a squared over 4. All right, so as I was saying, the area of a triangle is what? Base, which is a times the height, divided by 2, or a half base by height. So let's write that. Okay, so I have that the area of the triangle is equal to a half times the base times the height. All right, so that's equal to a half times the base, which is a, times the height, which is the square root of 3a squared over 4. All right, so what I can do is start simplifying here. I can write leave this as a half, multiply by, put this a over 1. I can simplify a little bit here. All right, we could write this as the square root of 3 times the square root of a squared over the square root of 4. So let me show you. So we have the square root of 3 times the square root of a squared divided by the square root of 4. All right, so what will happen here is that square root of a squared will just give it a, and square root of 4 will give it 2. So what we'll have is a half times a over 1 times the square root of 3 times a over 2. All right, so as I said, the square root of a squared is a, and the square root of 4 is 2. Now, does it look better when you write, like when you have a square root of a number like this, that if you put the symbol in front of it, does that look better that way? All right, but nothing wrong with writing it like this, right? So what we can do is start multiplying across. All right, 1 by a is a, and a times the square root of 3 times a. These two a's, when you multiply, it will give you a squared. So what I can do is I can write that as a squared square root of 3. So again, the 1 by a is a, and a multiplied by square root of 3a. The two a's, when you multiply them, you will get a squared. All right, so that's why I had a squared square root of 3. Now for the denominator, we multiply the 2 by 1, which is 2, and 2 by 2, which is 4. So we have this over 4. Now, I would have left my answer like this for the area of the triangle, but just looking at this, what they want is to separate the a squared out and just write the square root of 3 over 4 like this. These two mean the same thing. All right, so let's write the final answer the way they want it. All right, by writing the square root of 3 over 4 first, and then the a squared down here last. So now part C, they wanted to determine in terms of A, the volume of the container. So that's the volume of this container. So I'm just reminding you that the area of the triangle was equal to square root of 3 over 4 a squared. So we found that that across here. All right, the area of this triangle. And of course, the area of this triangle is this triangle here, which is the cross section of the prism. All right, so we know the volume of a prism is the area of the cross section times the height. So let's write that the volume of triangular prism is equal to the area of cross section times the height. So that's the area of the triangle times the height. And the area of the triangle is square root of 3 over 4 a squared times the height. And we said the height is this 3a here. All right, that's the height of the prism. So that's 3a. All right, so now just multiply this up. All right, so what we could do is we could bring this a squared back on top by the numerator. So we could write this as square root of 3 times a squared over 4, and then multiply by the 3a. We could just write that over 1. So 3a over 1. All right, and now we multiply across. So when we multiply across, we multiply 3 by square root of 3 and the a by a squared. So the numerator, we're going to get 3 times the square root of 3, and the a squared times the a will get a cube. All right, over 4 times 1 is 4. So we'll have 4 on the denominator. So we can write this as 3 root 3 over 4 a cube. And that will be a volume in terms of A. So here we have part D, where we have that given that A is 10 centimeters. So that means this height here, 3A, is 3 by 10, because 3A means 3 by A. So that will be 30 centimeters. So the height of this triangular prism is 30 centimeters. All right. And this A, which is the base of the cross section, right? The base of the triangle for the cross section is 10 centimeters. All right, so let's continue reading. So calculate the depth of oil in the container when John pours 800 cm cube of oil in it. All right, so they're giving us the volume. So they're giving us the volume of the oil in the container, and they want to know what's the height at that volume. All right, so we're going to recall that the volume, all right, the volume is equal to the area of the triangle, right? Area of the triangle times the height. And what we want to know is, what is the height? All right, when the volume is 800 cm cube. So I'm going to put volume is equal to 800, right, cm cube. And I'm going to recall what is the area of the triangle. So let's go back and see what we had for the area of the triangle. So the area of the triangle, we worked out that to be square root of 3 over 4 a squared. All right, so square root of 3 over 4 a squared. And of course, for height, we could just write h. All right, so multiply by h for height. So now they're telling us that a is equal to 10. So I can replace this a here with 10. All right, so we'll have 800 is equal to square root of 3 over 4 times 10 squared times h. So now 10 squared would be 100. So we'll have 800 is equal to square root of 3 over 4 times 100. So 100 over 1 times h. So it's square root of 3 times 10 squared, all right? That's a square root of 3 times 100 over 1. So I want to cancel this 4 with this 100. So you know 4 could go into 100 25 times. So I'll have 4 into 4, 1, 4 into 100, 25. So when I multiply across, I'll have 25 times the square root of 3, right? 1 times 1 is 1, so that'll just be 25 times the square root of 3, and let's multiply that by h. So I'll have 800 is equal to 25 times the square root of 3 times h. So now that we have this 25 times square root of 3 multiplied by h, and I want to find what is h, I'll transfer this 25 times square root of 3 across the equal sign, and the operation will change from multiplication to division. So it'll go underneath the 800. So what I'll have is 800 divided by 25 times the square root of 3, and that is equal to h. So if I go on the calculator, I'll just type in 800 divided by 25 square root of 3, and that'll be equal to 18.475. So I'll just write it to 3 significant figures. So 1, 2, the 4 is 2 significant figures. So after the 4 is a 7, so I'll write it as a 5, so 18.5. So my answer for h is 18.5 centimeters. So this simply means when the volume is 800 cm cubed, the height is 18.5 centimeters. Now here for part E, we have the net of the triangular prism, right? So this is the net of the triangular prism. And we want to show that the area, which is the total surface area, is equal to half a squared times 18 plus the square root of 3. And of course, they're giving us a hint that this A to B to C to D, this whole thing here is a square. All right. What we know from before in terms of A, that the area of the triangle, all right, let's go back. All right, the area of the triangle, right, was equal to square root of 3 over 4e squared. Look it up here too, right? Square root of 3 over 4e squared. So let's write that in. All right, so the area here is square root of 3 over 4e squared. Same thing here. Area square root of 3 over 4e squared. All right, so now we just have to find what's the area of either the big square like this or find the area of the individual rectangles. Now we know that this 3a here would be the height of the triangular prism, which will be this length from A to B. So this would be your 3a here, 3a, right? So then down here will also be 3a, and the hint that they give you is that, okay, well, this is a square, so that would mean if you think about it too, this length here is a, right? So this will be the length of as an equilateral triangle, right? So this here would be, from here to here will be a, and this length here will be a, and this length here will be a. So that means here's a and here's also a. So that's why it's equal to 3a, and that's why it's a square. All right. So what you'll have is that this length is a, this length is a, and this length here is also a. All right. So that's why you're getting a 3a. So that's why it's a square. All right, because the triangle is an equilateral triangle. All right, so the base here of the triangle is A. That's here. Base of the triangle is A. This side going up, let me write it in. This side going up here is also A, and this side here is also A. All right, so that's why this is A, and also this is A. All right, so the whole thing is 3A. So this is a square. So the area of the square, all right, will just be side by side, which is 3a times 3a, which is 9a squared. All right, so if I want, I could just write area of ABCD is equal to side by side, which is 3a times 3a, which is equal to 9a squared. All right, so the total surface area will be the area of this entire square, which is the three rectangles combined, to be 9a squared plus this square root of 3 over 4a squared and this square root of 3 over 4a squared. So this is like 2 times the square root of 3 over 4a squared plus the 9a squared. All right. So my total surface area is equal to 2 times the square root of 3 over 4a squared, right? Because that's this twice, right? These two triangles, same thing twice. So 2 times, and plus the area of the square, which would be the 9a squared. All right, this here now. So what I could do is I could write this 2 over 1 multiplied by, I could put the a squared back on top by the numerator and have square root of 3 a squared like this over 4. All right, plus 9a squared. And what will happen here now is that this 2 can cancel. The 4, 2 into 2, 1, and 2 into 4, 2. All right, so if you multiply across, 1 times square root of 3a squared, let's give back the square root of 3a squared, and 1 times 2 is 2. All right, so I'll have that my surface area is equal to square root of 3a squared over 2 plus 9a squared. Now what I could do is look at the answer that they give me, all right, and say, okay, this is looking at this to see how to put it in this form. I'm seeing that okay, a squared is common to both terms. So what they did is they factor out the a squared, all right, and also factor out a half. I'll show you what was done. All right, so if I factor out a squared, right, first I'll have a squared, open brackets, divide everything by a squared. So I divide this by a squared, and I'm just going to get square root of, actually, I'm going to write it like this. I'm going to write it back like square root of 3 over 2. You see better this way. A squared plus 9a squared. All right, so what they do is they factor out the a squared. So you have the square root of 3 over 2 plus 9. All right, see, you divide this whole thing by a squared. The a squared is cancelled, so you remove square root of 3 over 2. You divide this 9a squared with a squared. The a squared is cancelled and remain with 9. All right, I know my 9 looking sort of like an a. Right, this is a 9 here. All right, so we one step closer to having it like this, but notice that we half on the outside, right? So what they did as well is they factor out this half here, right? So if you divide by half is the same as multiplying by 2. All right, so what we have here is, if I pull the half out like this, a squared, open brackets. All right, when I divide this by half, all right, that's the same as multiplying by 2. All right, so the 2's will cancel and you get square root of 3. And when I divide 9 with a half, all right, same as multiplying by 2, and that's how I get 18. All right, so dividing by half is the same as multiplying by 2. All right, so it's just to write it like this. All right, with the 18 first. So let's show you how to get the answer. All right, so half a squared, and let's write the 18 first, plus square root of 3, close brackets. Okay, and there you have that your total surface area is equal to this. Now notice they give this as an answer as well, right? So if when you factor out the a squared like this, if you couldn't see how to divide by a half is the same as multiplying by 2, and to get this answer, what you could have done was work out this square root of 3 over 2 plus 9, and that should have given you the 9.866. So I'm just going to go to the calculator and work out that part there. So we have the square root of 3. All right. I'll use the fraction button and put it over 2 like that. All right, and then add the 9. Add 9, and you see that we get the 9.866. Just working out this part here, square root of 3 over 2 plus 9, you see we get the 9.866. All right, let's write here that this is equal to 9.866 a squared. All right, so you could have stopped here and write this as 9.866 a squared, which is accepted because literally this is one of the answers to look for, right? So moving on to question 2 now, we have flagship movie rentals charge an annual membership fee plus an additional fee for the weekly rental of each movie. You have an annual membership fee plus a weekly fee for each movie, right? So the graph below shows the total fee is T. So here we have the total fee. That will be the annual membership plus the weekly rental. That's your total fee. And as it varies with the number of movies rented, V. So V down here is the number of movies rented. What we have here first is if the total fee is 75, right? Using the graph to fill the missing values in this table, right? So if the total fees is 75, so you have to locate 75 on the total fees and then see what is the number of movies rented. If we look at our units here, we have from 0 to 50. So each centimeter, every 1 centimeter is 50 units. Okay, so we have 5 little blocks for 50 units. So if you take the 50 units and divide it by the 5 blocks, that's 50 divided by 5 is 10. All right, so that means each of the smallest block is 10. All right, so half of the smallest block will be 5. So 75. So 75 would be let's see, 50. The first block here is 60. Second one is 70. All right, and this line, with this line beginning right here, would be 75 because this is sort of in the middle between 70 and 80. All right, so I have the 75 right here, and that will be 0. Okay, so that will be 0. And that should tell you that if you rent 0 movies and the fee is $75, that means sort of your annual membership fee is $75. All right. So now moving on, well, they give it here. 30 movies rented is 1 to 50 movies rented. So we had to go on the 50 movies rented down here. Find 50. So let's see the units now. 0 to 20. So 1 centimeter to represent 20 units on the x-axis. So 5 of the smallest blocks representing 20 units. So if you divide 20 by 5, that's 4. So that means each little block is 4. So 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. right? So each little block on the x-axis representing 4. All right, so if we want to get 50, all right, 50, we'll come here now, 40, so 44, 48, and this next block here gonna be 52. So 50 will be in the middle. All right. So what I'm gonna do is draw a line up here, because here will be 50. All right, so that's the 50 here, and then it will touch and go across. I'll take this in the middle as well to here. All right, so this was my 50 here in brown. And if you count in here now, and remember each block is 10 here, right? So 150, this will be 160, and the middle will be 5, right? So 165. All right, 165. All right, so that's table completed. Okay. So here we have part B, where we have the total fee T, which is the y-axis here. T is related to the number of movies V. V is the x-axis. By the equation, T is equal to MV plus C. Now, this should look familiar, right? And that's why I said T is the y-axis. As we see, T is the y-axis and V is the x-axis. So if we replace T with y and V with x, this is y equal mx plus C. All right? So this would be y is equal to mx plus c. Therefore, m is your gradient of the straight line and c is the y-intercept. All right, so the y-intercept, we established that this is 75, all right? This point here was 75, okay? This was your y-intercept, c. All right, so your y-intercept is here, c, 75. All right, so the first one is easy. First one, C is equal to 75. All right, and then we have M here is the gradient. So what we'll do, we choose 2 points on the line, all right, preferably more than half the line. All right, so the 2 points I'll choose, which look sort of easy to read off, would be right here. All right, this is close enough, and right here. All right, it should be easy to read. So I'll make my little triangle like this. And this here will be my change in y, which will be change in, I'll put it as change in y. All right. So let's count change in the y-axis. We count in each block here is 50. All right, 50 units. All right. So from here to here is 50. There'll be 100. All right. 150, 200, 250. So my change in y is 250. All right, so again, we looked and see that our units, every 1 centimeter, we're going up by 50. So we have starting here at 0, to here is 50, to here is 100, to here is 150, to here is 200, and then to here 250, right? So that's our change in y. And our change in x, each unit is 20, right? So we count it in 20. So from here is 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 140. So we have 140. Let's count that again and make sure. 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 140. All right, so now our gradient m, all right, m is equal to our change in y over our change in x. And now, because as we move to the right, the graph is going upwards, it's a positive gradient. If it was going to the right and the graph was going downwards, it would be a negative gradient. All right, so it's a positive gradient. So we're just going to put the change in y, which is 250, over the change in x, which is 140. So now we can simply cancel. We see that the zeros could cancel. So we have 25 over 14. So m is equal to 25 over 14. Of course, we can convert that to a mixed number. All right, obviously 14 could go into 25 once with a remainder of 11. So we'll have m is equal to 1 and 11 over 14. So those are the answers for C and M. All right, so here we have part C, where we're going to complete this statement here. So according to the graph, the annual membership fee is, where we establish that here at the y-intercept is when the number of videos is 0 and the fee is $75. All right, so that means the annual membership fee is $75. All right, so that's going to put 75 here. Now, this next part, the according to the graph, all right, we want the fee to rent one movie for a week. Now, that's what we did when we found the gradient here. So basically, what you're saying between these 2 points here, this vertical distance is the change in y, which is the cost of movies from this point to this point, and the number of movies would be here from this point to this point. So if you divide the cost divided by the number of movies, you'll get what the rental fee for one movie is. So that's the gradient. All right, so the gradient worked out to be 25 over 14, which is 1 and 11 over 14. All right, so we want to write that in terms of money, right? So I would pull up the calculator and just divide it. All right, so let's write the 25 divided by 14 like this, and that's equal to, as a decimal, money is 2 decimal places, so we're stopping at the 8. After is a 5, so let's go up by 1, so 1.79. All right, $1.79. All right, so we're going to have $1.79. All right, so we're saying that Brooke and her family budgeted $700 for renting movies for 1 year. They say using the equation or otherwise determine the maximum number of movies they can rent. So the first thing I want to take away from the 700 is the annual fee, which is the $75. So I'm going to have money left to rent movies is equal to 700, take away my annual fee, which is the $75, which would be $625. So now the maximum number of movies they can rent, that'll be equal to the 625, which is the money remaining, right, to rent movies, right, divided by the cost per movie, which is $1.79. So we have 625 divided by the $1.79. All right, so we have 625 divided by $1.79, and we would get, of course, a decimal, so we can't rent a fraction of a movie, right? So we can rent 349 movies for the year. We can't rent a fraction of a movie, right? So we ignoring the decimals. All right, so that's 349. All right, so 349 movies. All right, so this part 2 of this question is saying that at another movie rental place, we have no membership fee. All right, but you're paying $1.95 per movie to rent for the week, right? They want to know from which 2 rental clubs would Brooke be able to rent more movies on the same budget. So that's the same budget of $700, right? So at Right Star, she can rent, all right, same $700 she have budgeted, but no annual fee, divided by the cost per movie, which is $1.95. All right, so we're going to have the 700 divided by $1.95, and that's going to be 358 and a fraction. All right, so we're ignoring the fraction, so that's 358 movies. So 358 movies. Now if we go back to what we had here at this other video rental, all right, it was 349 movies. So you're paying an annual fee plus a lower weekly rental, all right, but you can only rent 349, whereas here is 358. So obviously, again, more movies at Right Star. All right, so here I have, let's write up the justification. So she'll be able to rent more movies at Right Star Movie Rentals since she gets 9 more movies. How I get this 9? Well, 358 take away this 349. All right, that will be 9. All right, so 9 more movies at Right Star. All right, with the same $700 per year. All right, and this is the end of the exam. It's an hour-long exam, just 2 questions. All right, and this is the end.